Okay. Uh-oh. Uh, good e- Sorry.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. Today is Monday, January 30th, 2022, and this is the Historical Preservation Commission, and we will do a roll call.
Chair Haley.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Keller.
Here.
Commissioner Bochamp.
Here.
Commissioner Burr.
Here.
Commissioner Dunlap.
Here.
And I can't hear me. Commissioner Dahlia. You were just calling for roll call if you're present. Hi, Randy. Can you hear us? Hold on. I got it. Hi, Randy. Can you hear us?
I can. There's a bit of an echo, but other than that, I can hear you fine.
Okay. Where is that? That must be coming from. Sounds like it's coming. Is that one on? No, I mean, it sounded like. Is everybody muted? Can you tell?
Well, no, mine. Oh, on my mic. All right, so we have our commissioners online and in person, and I think all of our names are correct now, it looks like, right? But for anyone
Yes,
that's...
yeah, we've got a
Okay.
full house. All commissioners are present.
Okay.
And everybody's name is up on the screen. We have one member of the public, it looks like, in attendance online.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, now our agenda for this evening, any changes? Otherwise, we can have a motion to approve. Unless there's anything we want to add or change.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, and then we have election of officers for this year, 2023. So we'll have a chair, vice chair, is that what you call it? Vice chair? And also our historical commission liaison, so.
In light of the great job that Linda and Chrissy have done for the last year, I would move to reelect Linda as commissioner and Chrissy as vice chair. Chair, I guess, not commissioner.
I would second that.
Do you want to?
I'd be happy to accept the vice chair position. Thank you.
Yep, and I'm happy to do it another time, so.
Thank you.
Sure. So we will do we do a roll call or can we just do a roll call?
You can just call for the vote.
Okay. So we have a second. So all those in favor of those
Aye.
two?
Aye.
Aye. And all those opposed? All right. And then our historical commission liaison, this is a person from our commission who attends the historical commission meetings. I don't know if they still have virtual. Do they still have virtual?
I don't know if they do.
I don't know if they do or not, but they're basically the commission that oversees the museum. And so we've just found it beneficial just to have someone just kind of going to their meetings. They meet every 2 months, is that right?
Every other month.
Every other month. And then,
Odd month.
yeah. And so just to keep tabs and kind of have good communication between our two commissions. So Keith has been doing it more than 1 year, or was last year your first
Just
year?
last night, Chrissy and I shared it.
Okay, shared it, yeah. So would you like to keep doing that?
Yeah, I can do that unless somebody else is adamant about taking over.
Yeah, that's great.
so that's fine.
And I would nominate Keith Heller to be the Historical Commission liaison.
I'd second that.
And all in favor? Aye. All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Keith. We really appreciate that. All right, and then our minutes from our last meeting, December 19th, 2022. Those were in the agenda, so if there's any changes we want to make, otherwise we can make a motion to approve those.
And Chair Haley, if I, sorry to interrupt,
No.
we have 3 new members too, and
Yes.
I'm not hearing a vote of all the members, not that it's critically important on these things, but I think just getting
Okay,
used to
making sure
things.
everyone says
Yeah,
it.
we might want to let, maybe just slow down a little bit for people
Sure.
to catch up and make sure they get their voice
Totally, that's
vote
great.
heard, since we aren't going to do roll call.
All right,
And I know, and Commissioner, and if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, please correct me, Commissioner Dahlia has his hand raised as well.
oh, yes.
Yep. So if you want to call on him, he
Sure.
can speak as well.
Yes, Commissioner Dahlia.
Make sure.
Did you want to say anything? Or was that maybe he was voting?
Yeah. Randy, can you hear us? Okay. Randy, can you hear either Linda or I? We see that your hand is raised. We're not sure if you have a question. It seems like you can't hear us as well.
Sometimes you could type something and it'll come through on his side.
All right. Can you hear us?
That's much better.
Okay. So give us a second. I think we've got some feedback issues when we unmute here.
Is there an echo now? No, right?
No, I think
Okay.
you've taken care of it from this side.
Because the microphone's different than the computer, so we should be good. Can you hear me, Randy?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. We got it figured out. So Rob was just saying that I was moving a little too fast for the voting, so we just want to make sure that we got everyone's voice heard for the, well, I guess maybe for everything. Did you hear everyone's for everything?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Again, they're not not major votes or anything, but
Okay.
and we can do roll call if easier. But if voice vote, let's just
Okay.
pause for a few seconds, make
Great.
sure that all the participants are able to.
Okay.
Get
So
their
we'll
vote
go,
in.
so we'll redo the approval of minutes from our last meeting, which obviously they weren't actually at anyway. So maybe that's why they didn't vote also.
Right. So they could,
So-
and you might ask for who's recusing themselves as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
you can ask for a
Yeah.
yes, a no, and a recusal.
Okay. So yeah, so if you would like to recuse yourself,
Yes.
I would.
okay. And Randy, would you like to recuse yourself as well from that approval from our last month meeting minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So let's redo the vote for those of us who were there. Do you want to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
I'll second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. So maybe this is good that we don't have public hearing today. This is a good practice for everybody.
Right, and we have one person in attendance.
Yep, for public.
Josh, yeah, Josh Anderson is the name. Oh, is that a? Oh, it's Josh. Sorry. I thought
I'll be
that was
public though, if you like. Yeah. If you could just make my voice echo twice.
Yeah, make
in
your
there.
voice echo twice. There was a public meeting in here earlier, and we weren't able to get in early, so we didn't get to set up as early as
Oh.
normal. But so we don't have any public. I would maybe suggest with the, some of you have met the new members because we had some cross-training.
Right.
But it might be a good opportunity, since we have a few extra minutes, maybe just for everybody to introduce themselves, both the new and existing commissioners.
Yep.
If you want to go maybe across the table and
Okay.
say who you are and maybe how long you've been with the commission for the new folks, and the new folks, if you want to just give a quick introduction, that'd be great.
Great. So we're very excited for our new commissioners. So thank you for your time and being willing to apply and be with us. So yes, Josh, if you'd like to go first.
Name's Josh Anderson, architect of almost 20 years and a Louisville resident for the last 15, and just interested in helping out.
I'm Marty Beauchamp, local architect with Red Pencil Architecture. Been a resident for 16 years now.
As Linda said, we're very excited to have all of our new members and to continue with the same members. So nice size commission right now. My name is Chrissy Berg. I'm the vice chair. It's my 3rd year with Historic Preservation Commission, and my 10th year living in Louisville.
And my name's Linda Haley, and I've lived in Louisville for 11 years, and I'm chair.
And you've been the chair for 10 years?
No, not 10 years.
Oh.
Not 10.
Isn't that what you said? Oh,
I've been on the commission for 10 years, but not chair.
oh, that yet. I'm Gary Dunlap, the real Gary. I've been an Old Town resident for 27 years now, and I've been on the commission, I think, 5 years. Is that right?
Oh, I don't know. That's
4 or
good.
5 years?
It goes fast.
Hi, I'm Keith Keller. I'm retired. I'm an engineer by trade, but currently retired. Lived in Louisville for about 20 years. Old Town for the past 8 years now, and been on the commission for several years. I don't even remember how long, but anyway, I'm the geeky guy that weighs in on any engineering aspect. Pleased to meet you.
And then Randy, would you like to go?
Sure. Welcome and apologies for not being there in person. As Amelia knows, I'm the owner of a shiny new knee as of about 2.5 weeks ago. So I'm still a little gimpy getting around. I'm new resident to Louisville, just in the last couple of years. I have a bachelor and a master's in architecture, but after business school, I've been a long-term management consultant. Retired about 7 years now, and am looking forward to getting involved with Louisville. I've done similar roles with my prior town in New Canaan, Connecticut, and I'm looking forward to participating. So thanks. I'm looking forward to meeting you all in person next meeting.
All right. Yes, it's very good to have a full commission. So just thank you, thank you.
If it's not out of line, I might mention something I heard today. I liked listening to that Marketplace program on public radio. It talked about community governments across the country, state and local levels, and that if you're fortunate enough to live in California, you might get a salary for being a commissioner. But I think it's wonderful that we have new participants and so many people willing to help with the city on all kinds of commissions. And yeah, thanks for Amelia for doing the groundwork to let people know about it and volunteers. So it was kind of pleasing to hear that that was happening here where it doesn't happen obviously everywhere.
Yeah, it's a big deal because it is a lot of time and energy, and so, yeah, we don't take it lightly that you spend your Mondays with us at once a month. All right, so we have a lot of planning to do for our upcoming year. So we have our discussion and direction, and we'll have staff just kind of introduce that for us.
Yeah, so I'm mostly just going to let you know what's in the packet just to make sure you all have that. And I have a couple extra copies of everything if you need it. So if anybody wants, after I'm done with my presentation, raise your hand, I'll bring it to you. And I can make more copies as well, just so you can have them for easy reference. But the main thing, let me actually pause and make sure. Randy, can you see my presentation, my PowerPoint?
I cannot. I only have the dais of the commission and my picture on the screen.
Okay, great. Okay, for you, Randy, we're facing another moment, a moment of challenge. I'm still disabled here.
The operator.
I think we've missed something key while setting it up, and it's just still not showing up.
Yeah, so just in the interest of time, I've gone through the package. If you cue me in as needed, but I'll try to follow along. So don't hold it up on my account.
Okay, I think that's fair. We'll maybe work a little bit on this during discussion too, because there are a couple
Sure.
slides later that have some content, but really fair, and I appreciate that very much, Randy. Okay, so I will just kind of briefly say, the materials that are in your staff packet, they're really just for your reference, just to kind of help you try to decide how you want to approach this 2023 work plan. So that worksheet, that's just, again, I don't need that. You can just use it if it's helpful. The roles and responsibilities language, again, that's for your reference. The survey results, the accountability plan, just so you know kind of what to draw on. So if you would like for me to go through any of that, I'm more than happy to give it a quick skim. But in the interest of time, I just wanted to check first if that. So I'll look to you, Chair Haley. Would you like me to kind of go over that content, or are we feeling prepared to start the conversation?
It'd be helpful.
Okay, happy to. Yep, all right. So I'm gonna have to just listen to my fascinating voice and no pictures or anything. But the kind of main sections that I had on here were the prioritization and evaluation. So these were just some, I think there's like 5 or 6 guiding questions on there to sort of help you decide, are these projects important or not? And I guess I should also start with what's at the end of the packet, which is a list of all the projects. And as the people who were here last year know, that's a list that came from staff recommendations and listening to the commission and discussing during our December hearing meeting. So that is really just a list of ideas. And if it's not at all, let me say very clearly, meant to be the full list that we tackle in this year, I think that would probably be impossible. But it's really just meant to be kind of the sand in the sandbox for you to play with. So in trying to evaluate and prioritize those different, that long list of projects, we have these 6 or 7 priorities and evaluation questions. So, is this a required part of the work? Is it urgent? Does it have an upcoming deadline already? Do we have people who are willing to actually engage with it, right? So the responsible party, probably one of the more important ones. Does it have a strong connection to the role and responsibilities of the HPC, which I'll touch on in a second? What prerequisites, so what has to happen before, and then what is this necessary to, right? So are there projects that have to happen before this one can, or vice versa, right? Sort of standard stuff. And then the last piece, was does this relate at all to helping the HPC sort of setting up the preservation master plan potentially as something to happen next year. So I know for the new commissioners, that might be pretty fresh. I think it's just something that we talked about, and I'm happy to go through that a little bit more, but just to know, I think I'll look probably to guidance from our 2022 commissioners, whether you think that's kind of hitting the mark for you or not. And then I'm not going to read all the roles and responsibilities, but I'll just kind of let you know that they do come from several different places. We pulled from the master plan, a couple of the resolutions, and kind of what is the goal here. And in general, they boil down to actually enacting the code, right? So that's, every Monday, or not every Monday, every month. They also talk about education. Every different piece talks about the importance of educating the public on the program. And that can be proactive education for specific properties, but it can also just be general education, right? And then I think the other piece is just a sort of general role of preserving the character of Louisville, and that can sort of take any number of different forms. But I think education, actually enacting the code, and then preserving the character proactively and reactively as well, right? It's my sort of quick summary there. And then the survey results, so I just actually want to thank you all I got full 100% participation, which was really helpful. And I think this is just a helpful kind of way of looking at what skills do we have available to us to enact these different projects. So we really run the gamut. I mean, you all are really talented folks, and you've got writing and preservation experience, obviously architecture, engineering, science, management, finance, lots to draw on here. And then also, another piece of gratitude, you're all willing to offer some time, at least a little bit of time outside of these standard meetings. So that's also really good to know as we're setting up subcommittees, and keep that in mind and be open about what your number was. It was probably split 50-50 between the folks who were comfortable with an additional hour to 3 hours, and then above and beyond that. And I think we had interest. I think the takeaway is we had interest in all different types of projects, outreach, policy, everything. So again, you are the ones who completed this survey, but I think it's just helpful for you all to know as a body that you're all interested in kind of everything, and that there's probably energy to kind of go any direction. And then the final thing I'll say, I'm not going to go through the list of projects, but I'm happy to give more background and information as those come up if you'd like me to. But then the other thing I just want to make clear too is, in terms of accountability, so each subcommittee that works on a project, hopefully one of the parts that you would do is sort of come up with what you'd like to do, what's your deliverable, and what's the concrete goal here, so you're not sort of just swimming and for lack of a better word, kind of wasting your time, that you're kind of being as direct as you can. But from staff's perspective, we talked last year about doing quarterly updates, potentially doing, a really big work plan workshop or something kind of in the fall. So we will have these quarterly check-ins to just sort of keep us moving down the line. And if there's more that you'd like or less that you'd like, we can be flexible. But that's sort of, I think, our basic plan for how to kind of keep these things moving forward throughout the year. And then the last thing I'll say, or just before I kind of pass it back to you, Chair Healy, the work plan, as we discussed last month, and that's shown in your staff packet, is organized by calendar quarters. It's not the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. It's kind of pretty basic Excel spreadsheet. I'm happy to fancy it up if you'd like. But the main thing, the point there, is just to emphasize that in each project, obviously, it's going to be your time, it's going to be our time, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why we chose the calendar format rather than, some other format that wouldn't give us a sense of the time, moving past and our lives flashing us by. We always want to remember, that time is finite and we never have enough of it. So anyway, I am going to now just work on taking notes and answering any questions that you have. But that's really all I had prepared.
Yeah, this is very thorough and helpful, so thank you. So this may feel a little overwhelming, especially if you're just coming in. I think really one way to start may be like, does anyone feel very strongly like this is something that I definitely want to see us do this year? Kind of what are some of our priorities as far as this list? And I think some of them So like, for instance, the DBA write-ups, Gary, have you still been doing those? Do you want to continue doing those, or do you want to, how are you feeling about that?
For now.
Okay.
I'll keep doing it.
For now, as in like this year, or just until first quarter, or what are you thinking?
Explain what
Because you
it
could,
is.
because you could definitely pass that on if you wanted, like kind of mentor someone
Yeah,
else, if
That
you.
might be, if anybody has any interest. Louisville has a downtown business association with the, mostly the commercial businesses in town. And they do their own newsletter so they get together advertising and things. And they have been having for a number of years a monthly blurb that is about historic preservation, and it's some one structure or something, and what the history is briefly. It's just a short thing. Caleb Dickinson did it at the time that I joined the committee, and then when he went to the city council, I took that over. So it's just a little snippet of history every month, and Jenny, who runs the Singing Cook across the street, puts together the newsletter. So it's just a way of getting some interest and pointing them to Amelia if anybody is interested in historic preservation. So, yeah, if somebody's interested in that, maybe I could, in the future, pull some examples and show people what it is, and if anybody's
That'd be great.
interested in doing a little writing.
Yeah, and even like having someone you could alternate with or something like that.
Yeah, basically the information that goes into it is from the records that are on the Laserfish site, the analysis of structures that in history that Bridget Bacon and the museum have done. So nothing too original, and get some pictures and send it into them. So I'll make a note to gather something for the next meeting.
Okay. So looking at our chart. So she has, she's created this.
Should we be doing that?
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm just looking. It's the, so is that the same, just color coded and fancier than what was in our packet? Okay.
Yeah, so as my plan to take notes is to kind of move these around the really simplified work plan so that we can see where
Okay.
if there's a ton going on in Q1 and not Q3 or something like that.
Gotcha. So I'm just gonna go through things that are kind of already being done that we want to continue. Does that kind of make sense? So like, that's why I was like, oh, DBA is already happening. Let's make sure that can continue and that he's willing. So that's the first item we just addressed. So DBA write-ups. Is it required? No. Do you want us to answer all those? Like,
No.
talking
It's
about-
it's really
it's
for
just
your help.
discussion.
It's really
Okay.
for your discussion help. Yep.
So
I guess I could make you do homework. Thank you for being willing, but no.
So we'll have Gary continue that with possibly bringing someone to partner with him, just to kind of share the load a little bit and to do that. And then yeah, so that's one. And then another ongoing one we have is coloring book.
Right, so there's a subcommittee that was formed a little over a year ago to put together a coloring book of historic properties in Louisville, both commercial, residential, and I think like industrial, agricultural. It's sort of modeled after a historic coloring book in Boulder, which is just residences. And Gary had seen that a few years ago, and I think you're the one who brought the idea of the coloring book here. You did, yeah. So we are bringing it to fruition, hopefully by the end of this year. So we have an artist, we have draft sketches, and the artist is working on those sketches, and we meet with her periodically, and we'll take it from there to write-ups about the historic structures, and also focusing on the printing process. So that's something that we'll be continuing, every quarter with the hopes to finish it by the end of the year.
So our hope is by the end of '23. Like, you think December is more of a reasonable goal than like summer or?
think, right, so Gary, did you, in this, it was put in this as summer?
I just was looking at what was written in those charts, and things were getting rolling kind of slowly. It'd be wonderful we had something for the farmers markets by summer.
It would be, yeah,
And-
so,
And it really depends. We've hired an artist who is taking the photos we have of the historic structures that have been chosen. I think there are 13. And she's making them into a format that an adult or a kid might want to color. And then we'll combine them into a PDF as a book and have them printed. So, yeah, maybe that'll work. We have a lot of the information or the little descriptions that'll go with those pictures or those drawings, so maybe we'll do it.
So how close is she to finishing the drawings, would you say?
not, I don't think it's going to be at the end of, by the end of this quarter. So I think, probably shoot for the goal maybe of the end of next quarter. So as a committee, I think we have some things to think about as she's working, maybe other things we should be working on, like the write-ups, and getting printing solidified, who's doing that work. So we're continue to meet outside of these Monday meetings, discuss those things and try to keep it moving forward.
We
Okay.
might want to find a way to kind of multi-thread rather than just waiting on her feedback on 2 drawings to go to the next step and look at 2 more drawings, because that will take quite a while, if that makes sense. And we're using a lot of Amelia's time too, and she has a lot else to do too. So anyway.
So it sounds like, right now we're kind of in a waiting,
She's
Place.
working, so we're just kind of back and forth
but
with
we
the
could
artist.
potentially go ahead and start
Right, some other things, I
the
think. maybe,
informational part of it.
Perhaps, yeah.
So, yeah, so I don't know if we want to specify that at all, just as far as like, kind of, so that when it does come, whenever it comes, we can kind of be more ready instead of being like, oh, and scrambling, now we need to do our write-ups or whatever. So,
On that topic, Amelia, we met with the artist last week. Did we get those sample drawings from her?
I do, yeah, and I have it scheduled as an update. I'm happy
Okay.
to do it now, but I can also wait because it's going to take a little bit of time.
Okay, then we'll wait. Mhm.
yeah, update's great.
You know, that brought up a question, because you could easily take what she has and, put into an email what the direction is, what the plan is, and distribute it to the group members. But jumping ahead to the next big topic, which is the open meetings process, can we send an email? There are 14 commissions in in Louisville. It was listed, but can you send an email to everybody with information in it?
You're asking if we can send an email to all 14 commissions and boards?
No.
Okay, sorry.
To all 7 members of this one.
So,
Because I was thinking that I have the same problem with that description of the DBA thing. We've been sort of not sending emails. We've been only doing it in public announced meetings.
yeah, so tell me if this is hitting what you're asking. You can send an email to me and I can send it out to the rest of the commission and say, we'd like feedback on this thing, but there can't be like a conversation about it with more. So that's partly why we have the subcommittees, right? And we kind of, some of this will be really fresh for you, but that's kind of the way to handle that. So sorry about that.
So you're saying people could individually respond to you, but not to each other?
Unless the 2 people on a subcommittee, so if you had a subcommittee with DBA person, you all could discuss that as the 2 of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would have to go, it couldn't be a conversation among all of you.
Are you not part of the open governments process too?
Yeah, but I'm not a commissioner, so I don't put you over the
Yeah,
over the
but you are
top there.
part of the government.
It's staff versus commissioner, it's different.
Is
So
it?
so can I
From the
just
state
to
standpoint, would it be?
just to step back really quick? So I'm happy to talk more about that and
Yeah.
we
okay.
can talk more about it. I think that's an important conversation to have in general about this, just to make sure moving forward, once we get our groups together, we know how we can all talk to each other. So if we could bracket that, I think it's maybe great to come back to. But and I'm really not trying to get out of it. I just think it applies to everything, and I don't want us to spin our wheels. Then the second
To
thing,
bracket it, that would be appropriate.
that's right, yes, I like to
And
bracket
that
things.
It could be
Yes.
discussed in the next topic, which it is about that open records process, the Sunshine Law.
Sure, yeah, so,
I'll defer that. Thanks.
sorry, Gary, thank you so much.
And I think too, like one of the important things is it is like if we do have emails we want everyone to see, it does cut out time where we're not having to read it for the first time as a commission. So that's the benefit is you can send things to her, she can send it all out, and then we can say, we're gonna talk about this at our next meeting. And then we've all reviewed it, we've looked at it, instead of them having to go through all the pics. So there is a benefit, it does save time. We just can't discuss it in there, so. All right. So coloring book, so we're gonna just table it as quarter 1 and 2, and then if for some reason it gets pushed out farther, then we'll just we can figure that out. And then I guess too, let us know what you need as far as the summaries, because we can have other commissioners help with those. So just give us guidance with that. Is that good?
Yeah, will do.
All right. So let's see. Other quicker things. So social media is one thing that we've been talking about. We used to have the Planning Commission in general just had a little Instagram account where they would just send out things. And I think like we've talked about the museum and different departments have social media, and it'd be a great way for us to have outreach with our events, whether it's the plaque ceremony or any kind of trainings or whatever. So a lot of it's just getting that going. So I think that's this year we're gonna try to figure out how to do that. So I would say that's something we could probably put in first quarter, just to go, because first quarter is through March, is that right? Is that a quarter? So that seems like to me, everyone can disagree with this. I feel like that's an easy, like, let's get it out of the way and figure out how to do it so it's all set up and ready to go.
I would agree. I think, this is something we've talked about since I first got on the commission, and I do see on social media like the different things you mentioned, the historic museum and library quite a bit and other things. So I think it's a missed opportunity that we're not using social media to advertise things like the plaque ceremony and other events that we're doing. I think where we last left it is somebody had access to the account. We need to figure out if we can get that access from
It
that.
might actually be gone now. I couldn't
Right,
find
or
it the other day.
get new access somehow. So I feel like we're maybe overcomplicating it when we talk about it, and we really maybe just jump
What
in
did
and
you do,
start,
Scott?
with
Our-
the correct
our
permissions,
Instagram
just
account.
maybe try to get it going.
I just want to briefly clarify for everybody that the so Historic Preservation Fund and Commission don't have their own social media, but the city does,
Right.
and we do put events on the city website and city Twitter and all the social media things. So
Right, true.
just for
Right, yeah.
context, not to.
Right.
Yep.
So the library has their own. Do we know if would we have to go through planning, or would it be something where we could get our separate one?
We could get a separate one. Yeah, I think when we discussed this before, I think the main question is, are there commissioners who are willing to work with me
Right.
to write the blurbs? Because putting out enough content is probably not going to always be my number one thing.
Right.
So getting support on that piece specifically, and I think the logistics of how to actually set it up it shouldn't be too big of a deal.
And I'm willing to be on that subcommittee and help with that. So,
I was going to be interested as well.
okay. That's great.
I ran across a Facebook group that was Historic Louisville one time. I don't think it's related to us, but it might be interesting to know if we could contribute to them or something. It may not even be there anymore, or not be active.
All right.
That actually would be my question for the group as well. Is social media just going to be a platform on the Louisville.gov site, or is social media going to be Facebook, Instagram, And are we going to try to get more pull versus push? Because I think a lot of people go into the city, probably give a lot of things that they see on the city website a miss, whereas I think they might use other platforms.
Right, and I think we'd be looking at probably like Instagram, maybe Facebook, I guess Twitter. I don't do Twitter, but that's probably, I don't know, that might be beneficial. Probably a lot of people use Twitter. So I actually don't use any of them, but we should. Anyway, so yes, I think, and probably on as far as the website, maybe putting a link, like making sure that they know on our website that they can find more information on social media. So yes, that's a good point. Because you were saying you think more people would follow stuff on social media than the actual website. Is that what you're saying, Randy?
Yeah, I mean, we found in my prior life, we actually used our town website as for emergency contacts and links. And then we also use that as a bit of putting links in for people to engage with other things that they would have never engaged with otherwise.
Right.
So I think that the majority of our population, I would probably guess, don't really go to our city site.
Right. I would agree with that. Yes. Yep. And if anyone else feels like, especially the new ones, if Randy, if you'd like to be on social media, like I'm happy to let you do that also. So
I actually personally have some other interest
okay,
in
that's
some
great.
other
Yep.
areas.
Just making sure I didn't jump in before everyone got a chance. So
No, that's
okay.
fine.
Okay. Thanks for your input. All right. What do you think for?
I just think for trying to just kind of get some off the plate that we know we're doing, the conference is coming up in February, falls under, and I'm sorry, I didn't bring my computer with
No, you're
me,
good.
but falls under which are continuing, or meeting our criteria.
Ongoing HPC training.
Yeah, ongoing trainings. So we are, and for some of our right certifications or whatnot, we need to do some of those. So we will be doing that, which is great. I can't attend, unfortunately, but I think at least 3 commission members are attending in a few weeks. 2? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so we'll get that for first quarter.
Yeah, and just I kind of put it on there because I was excited that we had done something we haven't done in a couple of years, and so that will be something that we can achieve this quarter. And then I know Linda and Gary and I were already kind of coordinating about how to make sure we go to as many panels as possible, and then we'll also kind of talk about how to take good notes or make good summaries for everybody else. Not to spend a lot of time during the hearing necessarily, but just so we can kind of share the knowledge and the contacts and some of the resources since not everybody can attend.
Great, thank you.
And since we're talking about training, ongoing HPC training, I think this is something, I don't know what the priority would be. It's kind of important. Because this is what we were talking about as far as like kind of internal training. Is that what we were talking about? So especially for new commissioners, just like we want to make sure that you feel as equipped as possible. And then also there's a lot of things for us as more seasoned commissioners as far as what we could still be learning. So I'm trying to think of like where that would even fall as far as training and priority, because I feel like it is important, but like we also need to like create it, and so we can't do it like first or second quarter. I don't feel like. So with that, we were saying maybe in the fall for the retreat or whatever. Right. Is that what we were talking about?
That's what I was wondering.
So I think that it could go a couple of different ways, and I'll kind of give some examples. So I think if there are 1 or 2 people who are really interested in this particularly, I think it could start Q1, Q2. And here's sort of the resources that you have, right? You can always ask us if we have the bandwidth, right, to give a report on the specific code or resolution that you're curious about in Louisville. We also have the state office that can come, and they're actually like pretty excited to share their information. So they can come and give a webinar on really anything you could think of. If you're really curious about, window treatments, they can come and talk about that, find somebody. Or if you're really curious about how do I look at a new addition, all those kinds of questions. And I'd say that lead time, let's give them 2 or 3 months to kind of make sure that they find an expert. And so that would take, you could pick one this quarter and have one next quarter. So those are a couple of the options. I think also just being able to track what you'd like to talk about in the fall retreat, that could be another thing that you'd want to start Q2 if we're going to do that in Q3. So those are just, I think if there are people who are interested in making sure that everybody has access to the resources and trainings and concepts that they need, then I think you could get started pretty quickly, and I can give you resources basically as soon as possible for you to start planning that.
Sometimes our monthly meetings are so full of looks at, saving houses or saving structures that we don't have much extra time. But a few of the recent meetings, we've had some good general discussions, and maybe it'd be appropriate to add a 10 or 15-minute general discussion time to our agendas, if that's appropriate. Where we could deal with, different questions. I guess then we don't quite post, well, it's like a little study meeting, which are allowed by the ordinances within our general monthly meeting, if that'd be appropriate, just a short one.
To be fair, another thing we've talked about and that I've heard is as a subcommittee, you could decide how you want to go about this, right? You could say, our goal is to have 4 webinars, 1 per quarter, or our goal is to have every other meeting, we have a 30-minute session, or our goal is to have 3 trainings and we're going to slot them in whenever it's easy to do that. You could, as a subcommittee, that's exactly probably how I would start the conversation, right? Is what do we actually want to do? And then you can have these exact conversations.
So I think that's a great idea of just going ahead, because really using the state would be a great resource. Like if they're already willing, we can just do that, and then it's just a matter of deciding what we want to learn about, basically. Does anyone want to take that on as far as it'd be basically just scheduling what topics we want and like when it would fit in the calendar? So you wouldn't have to create material or anything. And I'm almost thinking even like if we just got 2 in this year, that'd be pretty amazing. 3 would be like, and 4 would be over, like, but I don't know, I guess I'm aiming low. If we could just get 2 sessions. Does anyone want to? I can do it if no one wants to, but. All right, I'll do that one, figure out.
I wouldn't mind helping out.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds interesting.
Okay, that's great. All right, so we'll work on that. And so we'll start with quarter 1 and make a plan for probably just figuring out a plan between you and I, and then contacting and kind of seeing where it falls in the calendar. Okay, thanks, Keith. All right.
Amelia, are we ready to talk about some of the other ones? Yeah? Okay. So I think it'd be worthwhile to look at increasing the grant amounts. This is something that's come up a couple times in the past, few years, meetings. Given the rising costs of labor, construction, all things like that. If people keep mentioning this, so it'd be good to, I think, start exploring. Probably the earlier, the better. Because it might take some time to, figure out what would be appropriate for the different grants we offer.
I would be very interested in getting involved in that. I had mentioned to Amelia when we first met that our historic preservation fund, I have some visibility into the numbers from the city's financials, but I don't have any visibility into the velocity of grants and how we commit and how we spend. So I think understanding a little historically about what we've done and putting that into context about what we might do, I'd certainly be very interested in engaging in that. And I would furthermore say I'd link it with the first one, the user experience survey, because one of my hypotheses might be that, is if the money is meant to be an incentive, is it working? And we're not going to know that without some of the data from that first project around experience surveys. So I'd be willing to put my hand up for both of those.
Just want to ask a procedural question real quick, Director Zucchero. So I didn't think about this before, but if they eventually are going to vote on the grant amounts becoming a resolution, is it okay that it starts as a subcommittee? Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to pull these over here, and I'm going to set up. Randy, tell me if this is kind of what you're thinking. Set up, we don't have to say 1 and 2, but we could say focus on the surveys, and then they put them in the same line, I guess, basically, because they're related.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And I think we'd probably, have to, from a deliverable standpoint, understand who we're going to go talk to about the surveys, how we're going to go do it face to face, phone calls, et cetera, get the data we want to get, and then use that to inform the grants. And Amelia, as you and I have spoken about, I think there's a bit of history about how we've used the fund in the past that I think we need to understand and have some clarity on in that line item as well. And that just might be me, or it might be useful for the entire commission, but I'd certainly include that in.
I think to some extent we could look back at what we did, and I think it was 2019, because we did a very similar survey. We reached out to both individuals who received grants as well as designers and architects who were working with the grants and doing the cost estimates, and got feedback. So I think it could be re-upping those efforts. So I think it would be good to go back and review that as a baseline when you do this effort and kind of see how we did it. There's probably some different or better ways to do it, but it sets a baseline maybe for how we did it, and might inform what you're doing.
I think that I certainly, and I apologize because I can't tell and I don't know all the voices yet, so I don't know who said that.
Yeah,
but I think that.
Yeah, it's Rob.
Rob, I think that would be very useful. I'd love to see that material as some of this, work program.
Did you say 2018? Because that information was probably collected in 2017, wasn't it? Was in 2018 when
It was the summer of 2019.
the new grants went into effect?
Well, sorry, so it was the summer of 2018 that we did the research, and it was 2019 that they went into effect. So we can use it as a baseline, but I imagine the numbers have changed quite a bit.
Thanks.
Is anyone else interested in that subcommittee?
I would be interested in sitting on that subcommittee.
What's that purple one say?
So I added in
Oh,
research on grant usage since 2019, since it's slightly different than the survey. We have a lot of it, but I agree it's going to take some time, and so I just wanted to note it.
yep, that's good. It was just kind of hard to read. Not that it's not well organized. It's just the color. Just can't see it. That's great. Okay. And then report on barriers. That kind of goes along with that as well, right? As far as, so,
Blended in.
yeah, I don't know if we want to put
That could potentially
another
be
sticky on that
Blended
line.
in with
But user
experience surveys.
You can kind of put it between those maybe.
So I would,
Yeah.
I would say, I think that just sorry, Randy, just to say quickly, you could definitely have the report on barriers question be a separate line and just have it start after the survey has gotten going. They don't
Okay.
have to be on the same line. So if other
Okay.
people are interested in that,
Okay.
they definitely relate. They just don't have to be of the same
Okay.
family.
And we could push
Yeah,
that.
I looked at that and I thought about would I put them together, and given my knowledge of the topic, I would have thought that you'd be talking to a different group of participants about barriers than you would about those who use the program. If that's
That's
an
true.
incorrect assumption, correct me.
No, that's a good point, because it would be people who maybe chose not to participate. So that's a good distinction. Okay.
We had a discussion that there were a number of people who've gone through the initial step of showing interest in landmarking their property and yet never progress. Nothing ever happens. And one of the things we talked about was getting some statistics on that, because that's pretty clear that they've gone through the first step and then nothing more happens. So that sort of leads into the user experience for the ones who do and don't progress. And then it becomes a barrier for the ones who haven't. So these really all kind of tie together. And maybe the amount of the grants falls into that as well.
But here's an idea. So if Q1 and Q2, Randy, Chrissy, and I are really focusing on these user experience surveys, getting those up and running, and then looking in Q2, starting to talk about the research on the grant usage. Again, it's there, but it's just going to take me a little time to pull together, right? And then we start talking about increasing grant amounts and report on barriers. Those pieces really get going the second half of the year, and maybe we sort of in a soft way, sort of tentatively schedule for looking at the increased grant amounts, the actual resolution update by the end of the year, sometime in Q4. And that way we're as informed as possible, because I will say I did a lot of the research in 2018, and it was pretty hard to get people to be engaged that quickly. Now, things are so much more expensive now that it's possible people will kind of be revved up and say, yeah, I really have an opinion about this and want to participate more. But I do think the more opportunity and the longer period of time we get to engage people is going to be important. So getting the surveys going early, but still not assuming that once we have a survey live that we're going to be flooded with input. It takes a lot of time.
Sure.
So I think if we can get somebody else who's interested, and report on barriers could be a staff request too. You could just ask me to look into that. I'm happy for that. But if there's somebody or one or two people who want to guide that as well, I think that's kind of the next step here.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind being on the barrier subcommittee, especially if it's later part of the year. Having gone through the process myself to landmark my home, I certainly ran into a few barriers.
Yeah.
So
That'd be great, really valuable.
I would also be happy to be on that as well, because I think depending on the linkage, we may pull it up, we may not, but it would be a good way to keep them linked.
Yeah, and I think certainly we'll, reach out to both Gary and Keith as we come up with survey questions about the experience and the incentives and all of that. So it's great that we have both of you here who've gone through the process or are going through the process and Gary's
Now,
experience.
would this be better as a study session so that we could all provide some initial input into organizing this, rather than creating subcommittees of 2 people?
I think
Because it seems really difficult to gather all the interest we are having right now in a subcommittee of 2.
I think starting as a subcommittee is always a good idea, because it's easier for them to put together an agenda, to put together kind of talking points, instead of it just being like we're all together, what are we going to do? So I think the subcommittee just helps direct it and kind of get they can do the initial gathering information and pulling things ahead of time and decide
That works.
Yeah, so I think that's a good starting point.
And maybe what they could ask for too then is a history of how many people have put in requests for probable cause.
Right. And
How
not
many
gone
have
through.
led to landmarking, and what is the amount of the grants,
Right.
that sort of thing. That's sort of black and white.
Yep.
How many demolitions were there?
All right.
I just want to say one
Yes.
small thing, just before we put this on our next half of year's agenda. I've called it barriers to landmarking, and I think that's to capture what we're looking for. But I also wouldn't want to assume that we have control over the barriers, because I do think the probable causes that have came in like prior to COVID, and then prior to the fire, and then prior to construction costs increasing. So I would just say for the record tonight to remember that actually there might be a lot of things that have gone into this that are beyond our control. However, it doesn't mean we can't do anything about it, but just to keep that open mind as well.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. So we have two forms of outreach: proactive outreach and focused outreach. So focused outreach, looking at our prerequisites, we have the Paleo West survey where they actually went through all of Old Town and like identified different architecture, different structures, like kind of
Different eras of
different eras.
development with architectural styles.
Yep, and kind of yeah.
Mapped
Like
it or?
a map. Mm-hmm.
Do it.
Yeah, create a map.
Yep.
I think maybe, was that part of your orientation, looking at the Paleo
No.
West? No?
We're gonna have a presentation that's on our year agenda. They'll actually come and present it to us, but it's a really great resource because it basically just shows every property and kind of why it's important. And so we've talked about using this document as a way to to kind of, and I think this is under the focused outreach, if I'm correct, where we're actually kind of pinpointing like these are specific structures or areas that we want to really promote our program and try to get those properties landmarked versus just kind of like where they just kind of come in on their own. So anyway, is that correct as far as focused versus proactive? I guess maybe I should have checked on that first.
Yeah,
I
you
just
know what?
assumed, based on the prerequisites of like.
Yep. Yeah, that's so the distinction is exactly that. The proactive was something, going out to specific like realtors or architects and letting them know how the program functions. And then focused is specific properties or specific areas. Happy to rename them anything we want, but those are the two things that we brought up.
The Paleo West studies, though, we have one that's coming due, isn't it? And would that be proactive research because we asked them to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I've just made these terms to try to capture two different conversations, right? So this is not proactive. We're not talking about realtors and architects right now, but for whatever we're calling it, the landmark or the property-based outreach, maybe we call it that instead. Paleo West, so they're a firm, right, that gathers, they do all sorts of different things, history, archaeology, and we've had them do several surveys. They have one more outstanding. We're working on finalizing it with them right now. They're slated tentatively to have a presentation in March. So I think where Paleo West comes into this is that it's probably best to wait until we have the final survey from them, because they will have, hey, these are the top 10, landmarks, or they probably won't put it that way, but they'll have more input. So I think once we have that done in March, maybe the focused outreach piece can get going after that. Is that kind of a good summary?
No, so that'd be quarter 3.
Right.
Or 2.
It would be Q3. I mean, it could start as early as
3 would probably be more reasonable.
2. I think the other piece here, if we're interested in this, I'm going to pull, and I do actually think it's an important piece that we've kind of heard, not directly from City Council exactly, but it's a way to really use and potentially our currently large fund. So I think it probably comes in conversation with the increase in the grant amounts, because ideally we'd be able to give people the updated numbers when we're actually doing the focused outreach. So I think it makes sense to start this project in the second half of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I guess I think about focused outreach as being targeted to a specific demographic group or property owner, whatever.
Right.
So targeted outreach versus more general outreach. And I think the general proactive outreach probably is very closely aligned with the social media program, because that's kind of the basis of what we want to be talking to the public about.
Yeah, and general versus target might be a good way to phrase that too.
Because we've spoken in the past about the need to do more focused outreach to people living in the Old Town overlay. You know, I think everybody in our community could benefit from hearing on social media about what we're doing, and you know, it's part of being in Louisville, but we really want people who are eligible to know what options are available to them and to encourage them to take part in the program. So we've spoken about some different ways to, you know, go about that, like perhaps educational, you know, seminars on historic features of homes, how to maintain those, and things like that, but just kind of pull those people in. So it's important to make that distinction. And back to the Paleo West survey, if the new commissioners haven't seen that, that might be something worth sharing with them so they can take a look at it. It really does a nice job of showing the different types of architecture, the different areas that the Old Town developed. It's really user friendly. If it's going to be updated or added onto, then it'd be nice to become more familiar with what's already there.
You got it.
So focused outreach will connect more with our grant amount and kind of research of our program. And then the proactive research, what we're calling more general research, outreach, proactive outreach. So this is just kind of more community involvement, like even just our like plaque ceremony and social media. And then we've also talked about doing more proactive as far as meeting with like architect firms, realtor offices, part of the training, and just there's a lot of just misinformation about our program that they just don't understand or don't. So just kind of giving some very clear presentation, but also like handouts where they can easily have it accessible to their clients and that kind of thing. So just so that we're not having to educate on the application time at the application counter, just kind of being more proactive with that. So that's another piece that we've been exploring.
So just to potentially add something
Yep.
helpful. So yeah, I think I tried to break down general outreach into several different categories. Another approach could be if there are two people who want to do outreach and they decide, but I think we're already down this list, so I think it's probably fine to just keep it the way it is. I will say, the proactive outreach, that's great, but the outreach events, at least one of those is a required piece and is urgent, right? So it hits two of those boxes, and that would be the plaque ceremony. And I'll just say for everybody here, so we have the plaque ceremony. We try to schedule it in May, because May is Historic Preservation Month, where we honor landmark designees from the previous year. I think they've run the gamut from how involved they've been. They can certainly just be, a really fun ceremony where it's a few commissioners and some homeowners or property owners and their family, and we give them the plaque and we say a cool thing about the history, and it's a sunny day and everybody's happy. But they could definitely also be a little bit more beefed up, right? They could be an actual outreach opportunity for the general public. And so I think that's something we've definitely talked about. And if that is of interest, to make a plaque ceremony one of those, kind of do double duty, right? Then we do need to start planning sooner than later and having a subcommittee focused on either outreach events generally, so they could do that in the farmer's market or that in the haunted house or what have you, right? Chrissy and I are
Making it happen.
Yes, we're gunning for the haunted house in October. But anyway, so just to frame that, some more urgent and required kind of part if people are interested in that piece to start.
Yeah, that's great. So the plaque ceremony, like Amelia said, in the past, we've just had like probably a max of 4 houses, properties at a time. And it's usually just the commission, whoever can show up, and then any city council people, and then the owners. And that's generally, so it's like a small little crowd. we do the ribbon cutting, and then you walk to the next one, and it's just kind of over. This year we talked about potentially having like a gathering either before or after, like at maybe the museum or City Hall or something, where there's like food and kind of more of a party and celebration versus just and that would attract more people and be more visible in general to the public. So that's, yeah, it would take a lot. Right now it's pretty minimal planning, but it would definitely take more planning and more.
That
Getting on the
house that was
calendar.
landmarked on Rex Street, the owners turned it into a celebration.
Right.
They were so excited about what they'd done with their house and about landmarking it. They made it a pretty big event.
Right. So it could be really fun, but it does take a commitment from really the whole commission. Right now, it's fine as it is, but we just need to see if that's something that the community's ready for, like coming out of COVID and things are okay again, and we can like have something like that, and maybe we would get a big turnout just because people are excited about things happening downtown again. So yeah, so that's something that's already in place. It's just a subcommittee that would kind of take it on and kind of figure out what we're ready for.
And is that something we can think about? You know, we've got some goals for things to work on, excuse me, for quarter 1. I imagine, this would be something we'd need to definitely start working on by early quarter 2. You know, is that something we can kind of like table or are we trying to get everything kind of decided on right now?
I think we can use those quarterly updates to revisit. And this already feels like, I mean, no one has said, I don't care about that yet. So I'm totally fine. I think it'll survive either way. And it'll be on my books to make sure that there is a plaque ceremony, that you all know about it, that we advertise it, kind of like we did the one in October. And that was great. And we can even, zhuzh it up a little bit more from there. But
Do we want to go ahead and just put it in there for second quarter, just so we don't forget it?
yeah.
Is that what you're?
That's what I'll do for the actual
Okay.
work plan. I'll put it
Okay.
in there because it will take up, I mean, if you all are willing to come, or many of you are willing to come, it will take up hours of your May volunteer allocation, right? Not that you have that from us, but just, again, to respect the hours that you guys
Right.
have all
Absolutely.
mentioned.
Okay. I see the blue parrot sign. So we have the blue parrot sign is a conservation easement. Is that how that? No, what is it? It's a landmark.
It's a landmark, yeah. It's a
landmark.
it's a
So it's
landmark.
our only landmarked item that we have, and it's currently in storage, and we need to figure out a place to permanently house it, or even temporarily house it, where it can be at least enjoyed by the public. So that's another that's been kind of off our agenda for quite a while, but
Has there been any suggestions, ideas where it might go?
we talked about at the library. The museum's always kind of but it's a fairly large sign, so it's not really feasible over there. So yeah, so it's kind of I think
So not really. We kind of just tabled it, and
Yeah.
because it is such a large object, and it's not really what we generally do, I think, so.
and outside it can be kind of confusing as far as like it's not actually in business anymore, it's just a sign. So
Right, but
yeah,
also
and people
don't want
love
to
blue
get
parrot.
damaged.
Like people would be very excited if they saw the sign pop up on the street again, and then they'd be really sad to find out that it's not actually.
We should
Yes.
start a restaurant. Put on the agenda.
So there was a lot of discussion about maybe putting it at the museum campus. And I think if they ever win,
Right.
they build a museum campus building, they talked about a large display window. There was some talk about putting it on a pole or
Absolutely.
a bill. So there is I think at least the feedback we got a couple years ago, and it could always change, was that the library was probably a really good place for it, in the lobby of the library. We looked at different locations around the city, including the rec center and some other places. And I think the library is seen as a temporary location until the museum campus has a better venue for it. And so it would the idea is generally in the front lobby, trying to find a place. There's that bank of corner windows just as you're kind of going up into the entrance, and maybe trying to find a nice place. And then we would use historic preservation funds to restore and find a way to display it is the idea.
Right.
And, there's been talk about, and this will be a discussion with you all and city council and library staff about maybe even mounting it on the wall in the library in the corner, and certainly getting it lit up, or maybe creating a display base for it as well. So a lot to think about once we really dig into it.
Have a passion for signs.
This would be one that would probably interest me the most out of what was up there. So I'd be willing to be in on that one.
Maybe first step there is for you and I to meet, Josh, and kind of share. There is a lot, as Rob just mentioned, that we can get started with.
Sure, there's some history to it.
There is. And just for my sake, I'm gonna schedule that to get started in Q2.
Okay.
We'll have our meeting in like 3 months or 2 months. This is a lot of other stuff to get kicked off in the next like month and a half.
Right.
And I was just gonna say, the Old Town overlay and the Paleo West survey, I don't know if I quite came to an understanding of exactly why that was on the list versus just as a informational type of an item. But I mean, as far as overlay maps and stuff like that, that's again stuff that really is up my alley, and I would be interested in helping with, but
Yeah.
I don't really know what's being asked there.
Yeah, totally. So the reason that I put those on was because they're going to be things that will take up both staff time and that also will take up hearing time.
Okay.
So as we're trying to navigate, how many subcommittee updates can we have, how many public hearing items, all of that. So the Paleo West, as I mentioned, that will take up meeting time during, hopefully during March in the form of a presentation. That one's pretty much ready to go. But in terms of the Old Town overlay, that will be, HPC will actually review that zoning update as a body and provide recommendations and comments to city council. So it's definitely something that as a commissioner, you're gonna have a lot to do with. I don't know, but it's not a subcommittee level thing.
Yep.
So there's consultants working on it and we're working on it and all that.
That's what it seemed like it was going that way. I was saying that's
Yeah.
interesting, but I didn't know exactly why it was on the list here, so.
Yeah.
That helps.
I think that's everything was on this list. Do you have any more Post-its over there?
Yeah, so we
Oh,
kind of already
okay.
talked about this.
Yep.
And proactive research, I think, I don't know if we really reached a consensus there. Realtors and
Oh.
architects.
Yep.
Sorry, this is so small. I'm happy to put these on my list to update, to bring up again after the end of Q1 maybe, or Q2. Does that feel good?
Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
agree with
let's
that.
do
I'd
that.
say let's kind of see where we are with some of this other work and see if those two maybe end up connecting to some of the work we're doing.
I feel like we always kind of hesitate too as far as the outreach, especially with realtors, if we're on the brink of like changing anything. So if we're talking about like increasing amounts or whatever, like I'm always like, if we put all the energy into doing an outreach and then we change everything, that can be kind of tricky.
And I think I'd like to hear more, like, if we, are crafting a survey about the user experience, and possible barriers, and take some time to get that feedback. That'd be good feedback to have before we do more outreach.
Right. And I think realtors might be a good, give good feedback as far as barriers as well, because they probably have a pretty good pulse on like kind of just general feedback they get from their clients as far as whether they, I don't know, they just have probably some good insight too as far as the overall feeling of our program as far as homeowners. are concerned, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we could table those and come back to them.
Okay. So I'll give a brief overview of what we've done here, and then I'll turn it into an actual work plan, and I'll start including it in our packets. We
Great.
can, you know,
Will it
get
be cute
going.
like that, or will
I can do whatever you want, Linda.
I'm just kidding.
I'll probably make it into a boring Excel spreadsheet, but I could spend a lot of work hours making it into something cute on this. Okay, so we've got Christy and Gary here on the coloring book, moving ahead with that. We have mentioned that we're going to try to do drawings from the artist and then also work on text at the same time. Seems like that's probably doable. Linda and Marty for social media. So we've kind of gotten a little bit going on there, and I'll send follow-up emails just to make sure everybody's connected with what's what and everything once we kind of get done with this. Linda and Gary are going to be attending our CLG training. I'll be there as well. We'll work on how to share out to kind of meet that minimum, which is be really exciting. And then we have the ongoing HPC training. Keith and Linda going to start coordinating on that. Then Randy and Chrissy are going to work together on user experience surveys, and then kind of throughout the year sort of amp up, our research and get ready for increasing grant amounts, and also, just whatever else we kind of hear from those surveys. The other thing that'll happen the first half of the year, Josh and I will work on the Blue Parrot sign, just learning a little bit more about it, and probably look to the second half of the year to actually do anything. And then we've also got Keith and Randy working on the report on barriers, so being informed by those user experience surveys. And then maybe we'll come back second half of the year, see who's interested, if anybody, in really that focused outreach, that targeted outreach for properties based on all of our Paleo West surveys. And then we've got Gary working on DBA, and then maybe somebody else join him at some point.
Can I ask a question about the increase in grant amounts? Since that's, obviously we have a certain pool that seems like it's there and available, and it's plentiful right now, is there any chance that you would entertain figuring out when the last increase was, or the amount was set, putting it to a date of, let's say, even the midpoint of this year, and saying, well, we feel like construction costs and everything else on average have gone up this much, so we're willing to increase it in this amount for right now, and we're still evaluating if we'll do more. And then if you're trying to outreach to certain people that are in certain areas around here and actually target somebody, you could also put out flyers in that specific area saying, hey, we're increasing it to this amount, might be more later. And again, it might just kind of feed into them being intrigued and wanting to find out more information about it. So it seems like it could be a dual-pronged way of going at, trying to target people, trying to get more of the money out there instead of, it does seem, and just speaking, government in general, it just seems like everything takes a while to get going. And if you could just get some of it going and have a solid basis for why you did it and what you're trying to approach, and then take on, we might extend it further, and then you have multiple ways to outreach to these same people and reasons to do it each time.
So let me just repeat back to make sure I'm understanding. So let's say the first half of the year, looking at like a strict sort of inflationary based or construction cost increase based, we're gonna do this by this amount. It's gonna be this fixed percentage. Do a resolution that just works on that, but also be thinking about still doing all this research and kind of potentially increasing or changing the grant amounts based on other pieces later on.
Yeah, so if you came up with a range of this, we think went up, 10 to 25%, maybe you're saying, I'm willing to put it up to the 15 right now, and we're going to evaluate in the rest of it at that point. You can really have a, leg to stand on with a certain percentage, and then we think it could be more, and we're still doing evaluation on that, and we'll find out.
Yeah.
So just a way to kind of get it out there and be able to use it to your advantage.
So a slightly contra point, perhaps, and I certainly agree with kind of the inflationary cost of construction. As I was thinking a little bit about this, that's a natural data point I think we would want to look at. I think we would be more credible as a commission if we take one bite at the apple as opposed to try to stair step our way up to it. And I think that just the onus is on us to be a little quick, as opposed to try to put a 3-month or 6-month fix in that we know we want to change in the future. So I guess I'd argue, let's try to get it right and come out of the box, with a fully informed proposal as opposed to just an inflation informed proposal.
Sounds like a great subcommittee meeting, and maybe we can have an update, sometime in the next, I can put this on my list to kind of get that subcommittee going and see if this is something that they're interested in doing and bringing it back. I think, anybody else I didn't mean to interrupt, but I will say, just again, having done the research and having been, Rob and I both being around when that was being voted on and being discussed, I will say it's definitely worth it to reinvestigate the whole amount and the whole justification. I think it was really well justified at the time, but also based on pretty limited information. And also there was sort of like well, is this enough? Is this big enough? Is it small enough? I think we could revisit in a robust way that would be worthwhile actually putting the full year into the research. But anyway, so put that on our radar and maybe revisit.
Can I just make a note about process? And Amelia, this is probably for you, but the rest of the commission. I know we have stickies on a box and, we can easily let a month and a quarter go by. I guess I was thinking, what should each subcommittee do right away? And I think, we should have a little bit of a homework assignment if we put our hands up to be on the subcommittees that is really about, maybe it's a one-page write-up about what we need, the process we expect to go through, key tasks and deliverables, and a little better fleshed out sense of timetable. And I think, and we're not obviously going to be able to explore and discuss and vet every one of those, but I think circulating it across the commission would give everybody a point of view about, yeah, this is directionally looking like what I was thinking, or wow, this is 180 degrees different than what I was thinking. And it would certainly give everybody kind of a better stake in the ground as we sort of progress.
You're saying include those, like bring those to our, kind of a write-up to our next meeting kind of thing, or just have that available at any time, kind of?
Well, I'm suggesting that, what are the subcommittees in the first quarter going to do? They should get together and talk. They should put together a page and maybe bring it together and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. And again, given the agenda of our meeting, perhaps it's not going to have the time to go through and present each of those, but I think it's at least informing the commission about the direction each of these tracks are taking.
Yep. And on our agenda too, at the items from staff, we do have a section for subcommittee. Oh, I'm sorry. That's we usually have updates from commissioners. I don't see that on here. We have a little spot usually.
Yep,
where,
if it's not on there, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
I apologize.
So generally, on our agenda we have a item that's updates from commissioners or subcommittees. And so I think that's something we can definitely include. Just make sure that whatever quarter it is, those corresponding subcommittees have their write-up that they can go through and make sure they're on the right path. Because I think that's right. Like we don't want any of us working on things and maybe getting derailed or not really following the general commission. So yeah, that's a great just check in. But that's generally on our agenda also, so that's great. So we'll just make sure that it's a little more formal, or that everyone just kind of knows that that's the expectation, is that we have an update of whatever we've been working on for that month.
I think that was a great idea that Randy had, and that the people who have volunteered for subcommittees can put together a general idea of what they think they've signed up for, and the timelines, and maybe get those back to Amelia so that they can at least get included in the next month's agenda, and maybe there's a way you can also get those back to us sooner. as we have those responses?
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing is we are all invested in moving these chickens down the road, which I completely agree with. I think I'm happy to facilitate as much of a structure for that or leave it up to each individual subcommittee. I mean, I would personally love to see, I'm happy to draft some type of basic, update form, what have you done, what have you not done, whatever. But we could also do that in the meetings. So
Yeah.
I think my only hesitation would be, I don't want to create a bunch of management work that works for me but doesn't make sense for you all. So, I mean, like you've seen, like I'd make worksheets and stuff to try to facilitate this conversation. And if that's helpful, great. And if it's not helpful, you'll save me time. So just continuing to communicate like what's the most effective way for us to be updating each other and for me to help facilitate what you need me to do. And obviously I'll be engaged in every single one of these subcommittees as well. So,
Right.
In addition to that, not only do we get updates at the monthly meetings when there are updates to be had on what's happening in subcommittees, but I know that Gary and I in the subcommittee we are on have reached out to the broader commission when warranted for feedback. There's things that we absolutely want to communicate to the commission, get their feedback on, because what we're doing in a subcommission should be reflective of the whole commission. So that's always a possibility as well.
So I think we'll just agree that each subcommittee is responsible for some kind of write-up, and if they need staff assistance, that's great. Otherwise, we'll just take care of that on our own. So just a general plan and kind of itemized list of what you're doing, what you plan to do, that kind of thing. All right. Yeah, that was.
I'm also actively pursuing a way to connect us like in a more active way, like on Google Drive or something like that. But the issue we run into, right, is the open government piece.
Right.
And so it's very important that we do that. We are a democracy.
Right.
Like we have to be as open as possible.
Right.
But I'm still working on that. It's just going to take time to figure out what's going to work and what doesn't, how we can make the settings so that we're not. The worst thing is we really don't want to get on the other side of this, right? We don't want to have made something where now we are, genuinely not fulfilling, the commission's duties, or that we can't do something in the future because we did the process wrong, right? So, but I think software would be so helpful if we could somehow figure out a way to enable it and enact it. But yeah.
I think Randy was going to say something else also.
I was just going to ask, recognizing open government, but especially for our new commissioners, could we get a list of names, emails, and numbers so that our subcommittees can connect?
Yes.
Yes, that was a yes. So we'll have that emailed out. I think generally that goes out at the beginning of the year anyway. So we'll make sure that gets out this week so we can start.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. So any other final thoughts or anything on the work plan for this year? So it's something we'll continue to revisit. That's the beauty of this, is that because it's set up time-wise, we'll be constantly checking in on it. And so hopefully it'll keep us on track this year as we get going. All right, nice work. That was very efficient.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Amelia, for putting that together.
Yeah.
It was focused.
Also, if you think of other things that we haven't listed on there, like that's another thing, is it's always like an open document. So if we are like, oh, this is actually came up and this is actually more important than this, then we can always revisit it and put it back on there. Okay. So next item is items from staff.
Okay, so no subcommittee updates. Just a couple project updates. So I have copies of that were basically coloring book subcommittees requesting feedback. And so I will circulate these in a minute, maybe at the end, and Randy, I can send some to you as well. But basically, we have gotten from our artist 2 versions of the same image. And I will just rely on you to be able to tell how it works when you're looking at your handouts. But the question we're really looking at is, what level of detail do you prefer in terms of actually drawing? So if you have kids, grandkids, neighbors, yourself, you're an adult coloring book enthusiast, markers, watercolors, everything, just test it out. We're kind of using this group as please go share this with other people, because we're not at a full impasse, but we're at a moment where we're asking, how do we balance architectural specificity and integrity with, do I want to sit here and color 150 bricks, right? So we're trying to balance that. So I will share these. I also just want to note, I wrote this on them as well, but these are not the final images. So the way that they're shot is not the final. They're going to have clouds and stuff in the background. So as much as you can focus your feedback that you give us on, do you want more or less detail? That's going to be the most helpful. Always open to general comments, but that's really, we know the railings need to go, for instance, right? So that's that piece. And then the other thing I wanted to update folks on, I said I would do this to sort of report on our commissioner recruitment. And because we have now a full commission, I think it sort of reports for itself, which is really exciting. So I just wanted to give a brief review, and this is really, we've got a full commission, ideally, hopefully for a while now, but just so we have something to reference. For the most part, according to the surveys, the 3 new folks you heard either from the city website or from direct requests. So that's really good to know that, these basic things are also essential. I won't read through this whole list, but this is all of the different things that, that we did, that we sent this information to. We used a flyer, and we included information on eligibility and benefits. But again, it seems like the sort of old school basics are what got us here, so that's really exciting. So yeah, those are the 2 updates that I had. And then just to make a note on the upcoming schedule, so next week is the Saving Places Conference in Boulder, Wednesday through Friday. We're all already coordinating on that, as I mentioned. And then also the regular meeting, February 27th, we are going to have a quorum. I haven't heard from everybody, though. So if you haven't, let me know just at the end of this meeting if you wouldn't grab me and let me know if that will work for you and we can get that scheduled. And then the last thing I want to let folks know about, too, is the Beyond Bootlegging Part 2, Hispanic History, Racism, and Changes in Prohibition-Era Louisville. That talk that the Louisville Historical Museum is putting on was rescheduled, and the dates are online, but they're also here. Yes, Jason Hogsett is my husband, so little, I guess, nepotism going on. But the real reason I wanted to let you all know is because I've heard from a couple of you were interested, but also because this piece could really be, in my own perspective on preservation and history, right? The idea of who is represented and who is not is really important for us to consider. It's not something I think we actively are thinking about too much right now, which is, that's fine. But this is definitely research that the museum is doing right now that we could potentially draw on in the future. And so just again, Louisville Historical Museum is putting on these. They're actually doing 2 talks now just based on interest and accessibility. So if you want to know more about that, you can go to the Louisville Historical Museum website. And there really should be an update from Commissioner's piece on there, so I apologize, but
No, you're fine.
that's my only update.
You mentioned that historic presentation that your husband was going to do. You're right, it does involve us from a history standpoint, but doesn't the city have kind of a new initiative about inclusiveness and diversity? And it really ties into what they do as well.
100%,
Maybe they
yeah.
are actively involved, but if they're not, they should be.
Email blast the city and let them know.
No,
No.
can't do that.
Yes, no, I agree. And I think folks are aware that this is happening, and they're definitely related to each other, right? That this is something that the city as an entity is really invested in understanding better, right? Why does the city look the way it does? What's the history here? Those are vital questions. So yeah, absolutely.
No, it's perfect. And there have been some presentations, I know, at the Arts Center a few years ago that were about the history of Boulder County and why Lafayette grew like it did, and the strikes and all of that. It wasn't put on by the city, and it wasn't very kind in a lot of cases to our history. I mean, not ours in particular, but the history of Boulder County, the Klan and all that. But there ought to be ways to tie together there.
I'll just mention for the trainings piece, the folks who are working on that, you can focus it on preservation, but there are also tons of resources that I know many of them, I don't know all of them, but it's definitely something to look into too. The history of the city, right, and the history of the area. You know, I think in preservation, sometimes we think about those things as distinct, but that's fundamentally what we're doing, right? We're telling that story through the built environment. So those are definitely things that if there's interest in those kinds of professionals and historians and actually coming to talk to this body and doing events here, well, I think that could be really effective and relevant.
All right. Yeah, since we don't have our updates from commissioners, and I think we did a lot of updating in general, so I think we covered that pretty well. There's no adjourn on here either, so we can't adjourn. So I don't know what oh, it's on the back. Look at that. Okay. Upcoming schedule we went over. Updates from commission members. There it is. It's on there. Okay, there we are. All right, do we have any updates from commissioners? All right, and our last item is to adjourn. So we want to make a motion.
I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, nice and slow.
Recording stopped.
All right, he was on that.
Thanks, Randy.